Hey everyone, it's Allie, and with the release of the next 1.1 season, Harbingers of Ruin, being very close, the devs have released another news post on some quality life changes we can expect for the upcoming season, as well as a sneak preview of some of the balance changes, and I can tell you that the balance changes are looking really good. Now before we start, I do gotta apologize. I'm getting really sick, and I'm really losing my voice, so it's a little bit hard to talk, but we're gonna try our best to get through this, as this news is way too important to not report on. So that said, let's go talk about all the changes and what we can expect in Harbingers of Ruin. So to start with the quality of life, they showcased us something that we had no idea was coming, and honestly, now that they've told us about it, I don't think I could live without this feature. There are going to be some major changes coming to blessings in 1.1. The biggest thing here is that there's now going to be an NPC that is going to store your blessings for you. What this means is every time you go and do a monolith, all the blessings that were offered to you as options are now going to be stored in the NPC for you to be able to choose from later. This is a really nice buff if you plan to potentially try multiple builds with the same character, or you simply want to try out different blessings to see how your build would do. Typically before, if you for example wanted the all res blessing in Reign of Dragons, but then decided you might want to try out the crit avoidance blessing, but decided to then not want to keep it, it would have been kind of annoying to go back and get yourself, for example, a max rolled all res blessing if you decide to swap it out for something else. Well, the NPC is now going to store all blessings that you find, and it's going to store the rolls that you find them at. So if you find yourself a min rolled all res blessing, but you don't currently need it, and you want to use a crit avoidance blessing, and then as you're farming yourself a better crit avoidance blessing, you manage to get yourself a max rolled all res blessing, that blessing is then going to sit in the NPC ready for you to choose and ready for you to swap over to whenever you want to. There's going to be a small gold fee attached to this, but honestly, the fee is so small that basically is irrelevant, so it's going to just be a really nice quality of life feature, allowing you to experiment and swap around your build more without you having to go and potentially spend over 100 boss kills like I did trying to hunt down a max rolled blessing in the previous season. A nice added feature of this is that this is going to also cleave onto your alts. Every time you find a blessing on a character, it will add a minimum roll version of that for your alts in the future, which is a nice added benefit given that you really don't want to go and farm specific monoliths and you just want to push for empowered monoliths on your alts as fast as you can. And for example, if you needed a spell leech blessing to make your character feel good, you can now just immediately get it without having to feel bad or without having to progress all the way to empowered monoliths without you feeling like you're wasting your time farming for it. And up next, I'm going to cover 3 very quick topics that are very short, but honestly are going to be very appreciated for quite a lot of people. First off, we are going to have a small change to the leaderboard where we are now getting ourselves an XP ladder as well. Some people are going to really appreciate this. I know it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but for example, in Path of Exile, there's a pretty lively community in the hardcore scene that love to race to see who can get to level 100 the fastest every single season. This should be pretty fun, especially because you can race both for the global rank of level 100 and for your class rank of level 100, and I'm sure a lot of people will have fun racing in this. We are also getting ourselves a monolith change where we can now search for specific nodes in each echo web, either by clicking specific icons or specifically typing in a new search bar that's going to be available. This should be a little bit easier for you to find exactly what you want to find on your monolith. And then finally, we have ourselves a pretty amazing change, which I am so excited for, which is going to be a loot filter change. We are getting ourselves a little bit better filtering, where you're going to be able to filter for a specific stat at a specific tier, plus other stats at other specific tiers, allowing you to get more direct filtering for exactly the gear you want to see. And more importantly, we are now getting ourselves a filter for both legendary potential and Reaver's Will. In the late game of 1.0, it was kind of annoying seeing unique items all over the place, which you had to constantly hover over to see if they had any sort of LP. And this means as you push further and further into each season, for example, if you know there's no chest plate in the game that you want to see at 0 LP, you can now specifically filter out 0 LP chest plates from your game. I'm really excited about this, as the more items I can remove my filter that I don't want to pick up, the happier the game makes me. I hate constantly seeing random items on the ground that I know I will never ever want to actually pick up, and I am big proprietor of constantly removing them from my filters to make my gameplay more efficient. Moving on, next we have a few changes to item factions, and these are going to be somewhat major and maybe a little bit controversial. As we previously were told, we are getting 2 new ranks to both Circle of Fortune and Merchant's Guild. That means the max rank is now going to be 12, but that does not mean it's going to take longer for you to actually reach max rank. The total experience required to hit 1 to 12 is now going to be substantially lower than 1 to 10. Your overall progression is going to be faster, while you are going to either have a smoother progression curve with Merchant's Guild and have new things to look forward to in Circle of Fortune. The other thing to mention is that you are now going to gain a 5% increased favor gain per level that you have in your given faction. With this, they are also nerfing how much favor you're going to be gaining from high corruption, which effectively is going to equal out to you gaining substantially more favor at lower corruption levels, but you're going to be gaining less favor at higher corruption levels. Overall, if you were pushing, for example, 1,000 corruption, this means you are going to get less favor, but honestly, I think that is completely okay given how you kind of were getting a little bit too much favor in the first place, and it was a little bit broken. This is going to be a nerf for the power gamers at the top who are pushing very high corruption, but realistically for the majority of the player base where they were pushing 300, 400, 500 corruptions on their builds, this overall should be a net gain in favor increase, which should be really nice when stacked with the reduction in total experience needed to max out your faction. For Merchant's Guild, they are mostly just shuffling all the ranks around with no real major changes here, other than them splitting some of the ranks around so your progression curve is a little bit smoother, and them adjusting some of the rewards for some of the ranks to make a little bit more sense. You're still going to need to hit the maximum rank to be able to trade items with legendary potential, which isn't really changing too much there, but again, because it's going to take a shorter amount of time to get there, it shouldn't feel as bad as it did in Season 1. For Circle of Fortune, it is also getting a small reshuffling of where some of the rank rewards are going to be at, but again, it's not going to make much of a difference because the overall progression is going to still be just as fast. The major thing to point out here is that we are getting 2 new additional benefits at rank 7, where we are going to have double experimental items drop from exiled mages, which is going to be a major deal given how getting experimental bases in Circle of Fortune is very difficult to do, as well as at rank 10, all bosses are going to have a 150% increased drop rate for any specific rewards they have. This is going to apply to literally anything that has a boss bar. This means it work on the arena bosses, it work on the dungeon bosses, and it work on any sort of monolith boss, meaning that trying to farm whatever rare item you wanted before is now a lot easier. This actually is such a major change that in some cases, it's even easier to farm higher LP versions of an item that previously weren't really obtainable before. A good example of this is Face the Mountain, where it had a 50% drop rate from level 4. With the drop rate increase, it is now going to be realistic for you to be able to farm a 4 LP Face the Mountain in Circle of Fortune. The one thing to mention about Circle of Fortune is that it's getting a pretty controversial change where the max level reward, which doubled all prophecy rewards, are instead going to now give you double the rewards. This means that instead of all items dropped being duplicated, you now just get double the rolls. For example, if you were to get a red ring in 1.1, you would immediately get 2 of them dropped at the same time. Now instead, if you were to get a red ring in 1.1, you would now just get a single one instead of you getting double. Some people are not happy about this as it's going to make farming for some items, most importantly, exalted affixes on specific bases that you wanted, as the old rank 10 effectively gave you 2 items to attempt to craft on every time you got a drop. But some people are happy as it's going to make it so if you need only 1 copy of something, it is now going to be a lot easier to get. We'll see how this pans out, and there is quite a lot of community discussion around this specific change, and I'm personally not too big of a fan of it because this is a specific nerf to crafting based farming, which in my opinion is a little bit annoying. And finally, the last thing to talk about here is going to be the Gaze of Orobyss changes. Now, Gaze of Orobyss has been the mechanic that honestly a lot of high-end players have been really annoyed with. The biggest issue with pushing high corruption is that you basically stop gaining any sort of corruption for killing Orobyss. The majority of your corruption, once you start getting to 700, 800 plus corruption, is going to specifically be from your Gaze of Orobyss. This was a stack that you got for killing the timeline boss of the area you were in, and it was consumed whenever you killed an Orobyss to gain you bonus corruption. The thing about the Gaze of Orobyss is it used to have diminishing returns, where the first 2 gave you 10 corruption each, the second one gave you 8, the third one gave you 6, and so on and so forth, to where you effectively were not allowed to stack a lot of Gaze of Orobysses. Another issue with this is that if you ended up dying during the Orobyss fight, you just immediately lost all of your gazes. In 1,000 plus corruption pushing, the way the math worked out was that you effectively gained over 80% of your corruption from Gaze of Orobyss specifically. This meant that if you died, you lost all of them and you effectively lost over 30 minutes worth of progression. It felt very frustrating and it felt like a massive waste of your time, and it was really annoying, especially when Orobyss is by far the hardest portion of pushing corruption, and high-end Orobyss very easily essentially can just one-shot you in a very quick manner that's sometimes straight up unreactable. Because of this, they are changing the system to where you now only lose 1 gaze of Orobyss if you end up dying to Orobyss. This is a major change, and honestly, I'm really happy with this, as it's still going to make it punishing, but not frustrating to die to Orobyss. The other thing to mention about this is that gaze of Orobyss will now not have diminishing returns. This means that you're always going to get 12 corruption, which is higher than previously, per gaze of Orobyss, meaning that corruption pushing is going to be faster than ever. Another thing to mention here is that you can now stack as many gazes of Orobyss as you want to, but the exception here is that you can only utilize 4 at once. This is going to stop you from potentially utilizing too many at once and pushing your corruption level so high that the game becomes unplayable. The other last thing to mention about Gaze of Orobyss is that it is now going to be a lot better for party play. Previously, only the leader was the one who actually gained any Gaze of Orobyss when you did a timeline boss, but now all party members who have enough stability when you defeat a timeline boss will gain a Gaze of Orobyss in their own Monolith of Fate. This means that if you were to go play, for example, group play for the first week of a season, but then want to go play solo once all of your party members are done playing in a party, you don't effectively have to start from scratch, and you'll have potentially hundreds of Gaze of Orobyss waiting for you to be utilized for you to push your own Monolith. I think these quality life changes are really good, and all of them are going to honestly just make the gameplay overall feel a lot better and a lot more fun to play. And I'm looking forward to all these changes for the upcoming season. If you have any questions on anything we went over here, feel free to leave a comment in the comments below, and I'd be more than happy to discuss with you any of these changes or answer any of your questions on them. I also stream on Twitch every single day, so feel free to come by Twitch and ask me any questions you have there. Or if you simply just want to be a part of our community and come hang out with other kitties, I'd be more than happy to see you there as well. With all that said, I hope you kitties join me for the new Last Epoch season on July 9th. I hope you kitties enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you all in the next video.